Welcome to the Little Beading Closet. I'm Sherry. Today we're going to look at some beads. I found these beautiful glass horse-eye beads, but I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with them. I just loved them. I love the color, the shape. And then I took them to my table here and started playing with a few different designs until I ended up with my final pattern. I liked it so much I tried it out with other beads, more of an oval table cut and a round coin pearl. They all worked, and today I'm going to show you the pattern so you can use it to make whichever design you like. Make it your own. Let's begin. Before we go over the supplies for today's project, pick out your main focal bead. Would you like a coin pearl, an oval bead, maybe a sweet little table cut bead? Today, I'll show you how to do the pattern using this horse-eye bead. Now let's look at all the supplies needed and we'll begin. The supplies that you're going to need are going to be a focal bead, and today I'll be using this glass horse-eye, some bicone crystals or another little accent bead, and a 4mm or 3mm. You're going to need bugle beads, and you can use a number 2 or 3, size 15 seed beads, and don't forget the Delicas. I'm going to definitely want to use a size 12 needle, and I'll be using Fireline and a 4-pound. Let's begin. I have 4 feet of thread here on my needle, and the first thing you'll do is go through your focal bead and bring it down near the end, leaving about a 6-inch tail. 4 to 6 inches is fine. Now we need to put our Delica beads along the bottom of here. And you have to have an even number of Delica beads along the bottom to go from this right hole to the left hole. So let's see how many this will take. I've got 2. If you pick them up in pairs, you'll know you have an even number. So there's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, and 14. And just see if they'll go around from the right hole to the left hole. That looks like it would be just fine. 14, I think 16 would be too many, and 12 would be too few. So then enter back into your focal bead and pull the beads up along the bottom edge, like so. How many bugles will you need to use? You're going to take the number of Delicas that you needed to go on the bottom, which must be an even number. For me, it was 14. And from it, I'm going to subtract the magic number. The magic number is 4. So 14 minus 4 is 10. And I know that will give me the amount of bugle beads that I need. So I'm going to go ahead, count out my 10 bugle beads. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And then you want to separate those into 2 groups, even groups. So we'll do 5 and 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 5. So now you have the bugles that you need. Whatever number it becomes, you're going to separate that into 2 groups, which will be, for me, 5 and 5. Before we begin adding our bugle beads, I want to needle back through all the Delicas here along the bottom, This will get it more secure. So let's go through all these. And then we'll tie a knot here at the end. So let's just make this last Delica on. Just gonna pull this tight against the bead. And then this is where I'm gonna take my tail and go ahead and put in a knot. And I don't want the beads to sit on top, so we gotta keep them on the bottom. That's fine. We can add one more knot with our thread here. So now that we've gone through and secured these, we're almost ready to add the bugles. Come back through your focal bead one more time, and then we'll start by adding the bugles. The key step is to go through the first 2 Delicas before you do anything. Let's come in closer. So we just went through 2 Delicas. And this is where we're going to pick up our first bugle. Excuse me for the crazy dogs. One moment. Sorry for the momentary pause. I hope all is quiet on the set now. Let's go ahead and bring up these beads to our work. So you have a bugle bead and a Delica right here. We're going to needle back into the bugle bead, skipping the Delica. And at this point, all I'm doing is pulling my thread through. I can hold on to the Delica and make sure the bugle bead is close to my work and get out any little slack I might have. And I'm going to needle into the very next Delica here, coming out the other side of it. So this is repetitive. What we'll do is pick up the bugle bead and the Delica, bring it to our work, skip over the Delica, come back into the bugle bead. Again, I want to try to get out any slack I have, so I'll hold on to my little Delica bead. We just were coming out of that one, go into the very next Delica, and get ready to add the next bugle bead and Delica. So I'm going to pick up a bugle bead and a Delica. It works best for me to go ahead and bring those up to my focal bead and row Delicas. And then when I skip my Delica and needle back into my bugle, I don't go into any other beads at this point. I want to first make sure that this is not dangling far away. So I pull it up and then just make sure that it's secure before I move on. So we're just going to repeat until we get halfway done with this section. We got 3, we need 2 more. So go ahead and pick up your bugle bead and your Delica. Again, I'm just bringing it to my work and going back through my bugle. Bringing my needle through the bugle, making sure it's sitting close to my Delicas, and going into my next Delica. There's 4 are on. We have 1 more, so I'm going to pick up this bugle bead and Delica. Again, like I said, I like to have those up next to my work. So I'll pull that up there. So I lost my needle, put it back on. So skipping over this Delica, I'm going to come back into the bugle bead. Now I have my first set of 5, and like I said, we're dividing our bugle beads into 2 groups. After you have your first group on, and you come into your next Delica like we have been doing, you don't go through just one at this point. We're in the middle, and we're going to go through 2 Delicas. This time it's 2. Now the rest is going to be the same as before, just picking up the Delica, or the bugle bead and the Delica, and putting these on, and then wait till we get to the end with the 5th one, and I'll show you where we go from there. Okay, I've added my last bugle bead, and I brought my thread up, and I can go into the next bead, but I have 2 here at the end. There's 2 beads, so I'll be going through both Delicas. And that's what you want, to have 2 at the end to go through. And go ahead and needle back through your focal bead one more time, just like so. And then what we're going to do is come down 2 Delicas on this side. So come down 2 Delicas here, down 1 bugle bead here on the end. Let me turn it this way. So now let's go through the bugle bead, but not the Delica. We're just going through the bugle bead. Now what we want to do is take our needle and thread through all the Delicas on the bottom of the bugles. I know I can't get through all of them at one time, so I'll just take a few at a time. And I'm not going to be pulling these super tight against each other. You can, but then you'll just have to loosen it up. So just a normal tension. So it has a little bit of a fan shape starting. Oops, let's undo that. There we go. Let's get through the last 3 Delicas. This will help align them into what we need for our next step. And like I said, you don't want to pull super tight. I mean, of course you could pull it and have them like this, but we're going to be needing some space here to add our next row of Delicas. So I just let them have a very natural, sort of loose tension on this bottom. I'll come back up this Delica, and I'm sorry, come back through the bugle here on the end. And the bugle's so shiny, I feel like I can't even see where my needle is going. Let's go through there, and then come through the 2 Delicas. And again, we're going to needle through our focal bead up here. And we'll be ready to begin our next step. So you're going to come down 2 Delicas, down this bugle bead on the end, and only the bugle bead. And you want these, we're going to start adding our Delicas for the next row here. So before we do, we have to come through this first Delica pick up a Delica and go into the next one. So essentially we're putting one Delica between each Delica at the bottom of the bugles, and it's just going to be repeating this, and you can keep going. I have some little beads coming in. Let's see. So it came out this Delica, picked up a Delica, and go into the next. Coming out of Delica, picking up a Delica, and going into the very next Delica. So coming out of a Delica, picking up a Delica, and going into the very next. Again, coming out of a Delica, picking up a Delica, and going into the very next one. So coming out of a Delica, picking up a Delica, and going into the very next one. And you want to try to get the Delicas on the bottom to sit, this being the bottom row that we're adding right now, to sit between the Delicas above it. Without a warp, you just have to maybe give it a little pull so it's flat like that. Come up this Delica here under the bugle and through the bugle, and then through the two Delicas here above this bugle, and back through our focal bead one more time. I'm gonna get ready to add the next row of Delicas. Again, come down these two Delicas, come down the bugle bead, and one Delica, and into the first Delica on the last row that we've added. And at this point, we're going to be adding one more row of the Delicas, and go between every sticking out. It looks a lot like a peyote right now, so we're going to be adding our Delicas here. Kind of looks like a cubic right angle weave unit also. So pick up a Delica and put it in the space between every one from the row before. Not only will it will start to flatten out and look much more symmetrical right now. As you add them in, they're kind of like little keystones. And just make it all work. We're almost to the end. Just putting one Delica between every Delica from the row before. Up one more Delica, my last one. I'm going to go into this Delica on the end, and then to get ready for the next step, I'm going to come up the Delica and bugle bead above it, go through the two Delicas at the end on the top, Needle back through my focal bead. And then to get ready for the next step, I'm going to come down the 2 Delicas here on the end. Down the bugle bead. And it wants to go, there we go, right through the bugle bead. I'm going to go through the Delica here and the 2 Delicas on the diagonal right there. So that is where you want to be to start adding the fringe. Before we go any further adding our dangle drops, look at your piece and see if you have a nice fan shape started already and just want to keep that. Then you would use the same number of Delicas coming down each way before adding your dangle. Back to the one I'm working on, I want it to come to this nice V shape. So I'm going to take the number of bugle beads that I used and subtract the magic number of 1. And that will give me 9. That's the number of dangle drops that I'll be using. So with these 9 dangle drops, I want it to come into a V. So I'm going to start increasing to the middle, highest number, and then I'll decrease back down to 1. So as you can see, when I do it, it's going to have 1 Delica here, 2 on this one, 3 on this one, and so forth. Okay, we've brought our thread to this point right here, and that is actually going to start our second row. So however many Delicas you've determined you need, that's what you would pick up. We're starting at the second row. So there's 2 Delicas, 1 little accent bead, and a 15 on the bottom. I'm going to bring that to my work. And I'm purposefully skipping the first row. It will lay better at the end if we add it at the next step. So skipping the 15, coming in through your little accent bead and 2 Delicas, I'm going to go ahead and pull this up to my work. I want my dangle to sit up here and not down here. So I'm just going to hold my 15 at the bottom and pull this up closer. And then needle into the next Delica. Now I'm on the next row, so I'll be picking up 3 Delicas and then my little accent bead and a 15. Again, just bringing it up to my work. Skipping the 15 on the end, coming into the accent bead and all 3 Delicas. Pulling it up here to sit nice. Just take your time and come into the next Delica here. So I'm going to repeat that down to the end. I'm down here to the end where I would be adding my last Delica and accent bead, but I'm going to skip that for now and come back to it. It just helps it lay nicer in the finished piece if you do. So come into the last Delica on the end, come up the Delica under your bugle and through the bugle, come through the 2 Delicas before you get to your focal bead. Go through the focal bead. Now what I'm going to do is come into the first 2 Delicas, 1 and 2, come down my bugle bead, come down my bugle bead there, and come into the first 2 Delicas on the diagonal. Just like that, just those 2. And this is where I'm going to pick up 1 Delica, 1 accent bead, and my 15. And bring it up to my work, skipping the 15, come back through my little accent bead and my Delica, and pull it up to my work. Again, I'm going to hold on to my 15 and pull this up to my work, and then pull the slack out of my thread. Doing this just makes the one on the end sit a lot smoother instead of wanting to flare out so much. Now I'm going to come back up towards my focal bead, so I'll go through the 2 Delicas here on the end and up through my bugle bead, through the 2 Delicas here, and then I'll go through my focal bead and repeat that on the other end. So we're almost there, right through the focal bead. Again, to add the dangle here on this end, go through just the 2 Delicas, and then come down the bugle bead. I also came through 1 Delica, which is fine. I need to come through, grab my thread, come through 2 more Delicas anyways. Pick up another Delica, an accent bead, and a 15. Bring it up to my work. Skip over the little 15, come into your accent bead and your Delica. Hold on to that, bring it up to my work. Just like that. And then through the 3 Delicas headed towards the bugle. So went through 2. And then we'll get 1 more. Come through this last Delica and bugle, coming back up towards your focal bead. And then through the 2 Delicas here. And then I'm just going to go right through my focal bead one more time. Now that you're coming out of your focal bead, we just have to prepare to add the top so we can add our ear wires. And I kind of like the look of the bugle beads up here, so I'm going to recreate that on this one. I'll pick up 2 Delicas and a bugle bead, and then 1, 2, 3, 7 Delicas. I'm going to bring that down to my work. And I want to turn this into a little loop. So I will go back into my Delica, the first one, and the first one only. So going through here, pulling that down to make a little loop. And then I'll need to repeat my pattern coming back down. Let me make sure it's tight against my focal bead. We're going to pick up 1 bugle bead and 2 Delicas and come down into our focal bead. Pass through there. Now you can see there's sort of a little gap here and here, which is where I'm going to fill with another Delica after I pass my thread through everything one more time, just to strengthen it up. I retrace my thread path, and now I'm down to these last 2 Delicas here. I'm going to pick up 1 more Delica and come in through this bottom row of Delicas under the bead. So right through here. And that will fill the little gap. And I'll come around and repeat on the other side. Well, I finished taking my thread through the beads and securing it and adding my ear wire. Here we are with the finished earring. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll see you next time.